This is American Ground Radio. I'm Stephen Parr with Louis R. Avalone.
All right, we celebrated Mother's Day last month, and now we look forward to celebrating Father's Day this weekend.
Yeah. Happy Father's Day, Louis.
Happy Father's Day, Stephen, and to all of our fathers in our listening audience. You know, I'm again reminded of just how grateful I am to my parents for their immeasurable sacrifices, their tireless determination
Absolutely.
to demonstrate life's lessons to their children through their own example and not merely in words. You know, arguably, there were many life lessons that at the time, I was none too happy to learn. Of course, years later, I would be thankful for the wisdom in their parenting, even though I may not have fully understood it at the time.
I never had any of those problems. I was a perfect child. I
Oh,
was a
of
model
course,
child. Never
certainly.
got in trouble. Never had to learn any lessons.
But you know, this really got me thinking about hindsight and the clarity of the rear view mirror. You know, Mark Twain wrote, "When I was a boy of 14, my father was so ignorant I could hardly stand to have the old man around. But when I got to be 21, I was astonished at how much he had learned in 7 years."
Fortunately, I never thought my parents were. I never went through that. I never thought my dad didn't know something more than I did. Never once.
No, you know, I didn't either, except when he was teaching me a life lesson.
Okay.
That I didn't fully understand at the time or didn't fully appreciate. I mean, I owe so much to my dad. And many of you know, I'm the first generation son of an Italian immigrant to this country. You know, it was in 1964 that he came to this country. He was only supposed to visit for 3 weeks. It was by chance that he was here at all. He went to Baton Rouge High School to learn English. He painted houses during the day while going to school at night. I mean, he taught me about the value of education.
You know, one of the stories about your dad that I love the most is when he got his first job and they said, you know, how much are you going to charge us for it? And he said, no, I'll do the job. You then tell me how much that was worth
exactly.
to you. I love that story about your dad. And I've learned something from that.
Well, and he taught me about the value of hard work.
Exactly.
And how to be your best, to always look up. That was one of the... He just used to tell me that all the time, especially in times where, you know, maybe things weren't going really well. He'd always say, you know, you've always got to keep looking up. He taught me about the value of sacrifice. You know, if you look up deferred gratification in the dictionary, if my dad's picture isn't there, well, it should be, because he expected so very little for himself. And he also taught me, never worry about the other guy. You know, don't worry about what the other guy is doing. If he's working twice as hard as you or he's working half as hard as you in life.
Right.
Be your best.
Your success is not dependent upon whether someone else is successful. If someone else is successful, that doesn't take away from your success. Zig Ziglar said, success is not defined by what you do compared to what someone else does. Success is defined by what you do compared to what you could have done with the gifts that were given to you by God.
Absolutely. He taught me to be a fighter. You know, he said life, you know, he didn't say these words exactly, but basically life is a fight for territory. And when you stop fighting for what you want, what you don't want automatically takes over.
As a military man, my dad literally taught me how to fight. And that I don't think that's what you were talking about.
Not exactly.
Like
it's the fight.
He told me where to punch them and how often.
No, I'm talking about the Rocky Balboa, you know, where you've got that burning desire.
Yeah.
You know, you got to have that want to.
Right.
You got to be hungry.
You know, that was the other thing. My dad said, I never want to hear that you got into a fight you could have walked away from, but I never want to hear that you got into a fight and lost. If you're going to get into a fight, you better win.
He taught me family is everything. You know, my dad, he didn't drink, he didn't smoke, he didn't hang out with the guys.
Right.
All he wanted to do is be with his family. And you know what? That was okay with all of us because we wanted to be with him. You see, and I'm also reminded, in much of the world, if your father is a bricklayer, you become a bricklayer.
Right.
If your mother is a school teacher, you become a school teacher. Success stories of people in America who have risen up from nothing are so common that they're unremarkable in many ways, but they don't get mentioned nearly as enough. Because if my father had focused more on what he didn't know or didn't have, or how unlikely success would be for him as an Italian immigrant to this country when he first came to this country, me being here, it would have never occurred.
It's
Talking
highly
to
unlikely.
you,
Highly unlikely.
being with you here today, Stephen.
Well,
with all of our listeners.
What member of your family had a radio show before you? None, right? That's what you're talking about. Your dad didn't have a radio show. That doesn't mean that you can't have one. It's part of what the American dream is about. My dad wasn't on radio. My dad's a doctor. And while there's a time where I wanted to be like my dad, I wanted to be a doctor, I've chosen my own path. America makes that possible.
Right, because the American dream is not so much about the material and monetary wealth as it is the opportunity in which every person can fulfill their greatest potential, regardless of their circumstances of birth or position.
Right.
See, Americans, my father, your father, they are not great because they were born in this country or they weren't born in this country.
Right.
That's geography.
Exactly.
The greatness of America is that it allows each of us to see the greatness in ourselves. That's what my father was afforded the opportunity so many years ago when he came to this country.
Right.
That's how America becomes great, one generation at a time.
And my father achieved a lot of what he achieved through service to this country. He became a doctor, but he spent 20 years in the military serving other people. And then when he went into private practice, the reason why he's been successful in private practice is because he always focuses on serving the patient. That's one of the great things about America, is that you can achieve greatness by serving other people.
Absolutely. He's a West Point graduate.
Exactly.
And how many times did you all move as a family?
Lots. I learned to make friends quick.
And you did so because in your father's heart was a servant's heart.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of why your dad was successful when he went into construction, and when he went into the business he went into, is because he was interested in serving other people first. And that helped him become successful.
So anyway, with Father's Day approaching, it got me thinking about all the life lessons that maybe for some of you who are listening right now, there are life lessons that you are going through, some struggles that you are trying to tackle that maybe don't make sense now, like they didn't when we were younger, maybe with our fathers teaching us those lessons. Winston Churchill said, "Any man who is under 30 and is not a liberal has not a heart. Any man who is over 30 and is not a conservative has no brains." What do you think about that? But let's run that past Dad first. How about that?
Let's get to the top 3 things you need to know before tomorrow. All 50 members of the Portland police riot squad resigned this week after one of their members was indicted for allegedly assaulting a photographer last summer. Officer Corey Budworth has been charged with 4th-degree assault during a riot on August 18, 2020. During that incident, Budworth was assaulted by rioters himself and knocked to the ground. After regaining his feet, the police union says he used the police-issue baton to move some of the rioters, including activist and photographer Terry Jacob, back from the police line. As a result of the indictment, Portland is now left without a riot response team. Portland also happens to be the city that has had the most riots over the past year, has not gone a single month without a riot since May of 2020. The local DA, Democrat Mike Schmidt, has dismissed hundreds of arrests of rioters over the past year, but decided Officer Budworth needed to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law.
All right, well, let's put some facts out there. Miss Jacobs was interfering with a lawful arrest. And by the way, this officer used the lowest level of baton force. He used a push,
Right.
not a strike,
Right.
not a jab. And by the way, she didn't come forward to
Nope.
make a complaint until an attorney who saw the video footage reached out to her and suggested she should press
The
charges.
DA's office did this. Second thing you need to know before tomorrow, the state of Arkansas is going to have to defend two of its newest laws in court. This week, the ACLU filed suit to have the state's ban on gender change procedures on children overturned. The ACLU seems to think that parents should be allowed to make their children sterile before they enter puberty. The ACLU and Planned Parenthood also filed suit in federal court to block Arkansas's new abortion ban. The new law prevents abortions in the state of Arkansas except to save the life of the mother.
I mean, we should be making sure that children are not pressured into doing irreversible damage to their bodies.
That's pretty simple.
I mean, I think government's job is to protect these minors. They have too little life experience to know otherwise.
And the third thing we need to know before tomorrow, Louisiana is trying to bribe its citizens to get the COVID vaccine. Governor John Bel Edwards announced a total of $2.3 million will be given out to people who've gotten the vaccine. Children between the age of 12 and 17 could receive a $100,000 scholarship, and adults over the age of 18 can win as much as $1 million and a grand prize.
I mean, they still are reporting right now of side effects of this vaccine that aren't good.
And we didn't know about ahead of time. But hey, let's bribe the people to get it.
Even though the numbers are declining. And there's herd
infection
immunity.
rates, the infection rates,
rates, right.
Yeah.